promise of belonging. The legacy of the veiled sword. Anya Lysander. Summary. 1108. Can true love, and the ancient Montferrant legacy mend what war, fear, and honor have shattered? Isarn de Montferrant unexpectedly inherits lands and a name heavy with history. He is determined to defend them, but an inexplicable ailment begins to cripple his hands, stripping him of what has always defined his identity, the sword. In a world where power is upheld by strength, Isarn must learn that not every battle is fought with steel. Far from Normandy, in borderlands where cultures converge, Zahra lives bound by interests that are not her own. Her ties to the Hispanic crown have turned her into a silent coin in others' alliances. Amid veiled palaces and rituals of beauty and discipline, she has mastered a rare and dangerous art, the dance with the shamshir, a form of knowledge that unites body, spirit, and memory. A healer by vocation and heir to ancient wisdom, Zahra carries answers she does not yet fully understand. When their paths cross, it is not rescue that binds them, but recognition. Both bear loss, both have been shaped by forces they did not choose. Together, they must decide which parts of their legacy to embrace, which to transform, and which to leave behind. Set between Normandy, the way of St. James, and the lands of the medieval East, this is a story of quiet honor, restrained desire, and mature love, where power lies not in domination but in belonging without possession. Will Isarn and Zahra be able to claim their destiny, without betraying themselves? Epigraph. Not every sword wounds. Some wait. Beneath the veil of silence sleeps the strength that only love awakens. We will wound before name, promise before victory. Faith does not shine, it burns in the hidden. Preface. Year of our Lord, 1108. At the far edges of Europe, when the 12th century was only just learning to pronounce its own name, the world rested on fragile balances. In Normandy, stone rose like an oath. Castles braced against the wind, lineages forged in iron and blood, men raised to obey the land they inherited and the sword that defined them. Power there was visible, measured in walls, in vassals, in names passed from father to son like a sacred burden. Farther south, where the light was different and knowledge traveled in manuscripts, Al-Andalus breathed to another rhythm. Cities where music, medicine, and geometry lived alongside war, where faith spoke many languages, and the body itself was a place of knowledge. Yet even that world, ancient and refined, was beginning to fracture, caught between weakened taifas and the growing pressure of the Christian kingdoms of the north. In 1108, Alfonso of Aragon, called the Battler, was honing his realm like a newly sharpened blade. He had not yet taken Zaragoza, but the frontier burned. Alliances were sealed with steel, betrayals were paid for dearly, and bodies, above all the bodies of women, became the silent spoils of history. It was at this crossroads of worlds that this story began. A man born to wield a sword discovered that his hands no longer obeyed him. And a woman destined to heal learned to dance with the edge. He, Isarn of Montferrant, unexpected heir to an ancient lineage, fell under an invisible power, an affliction that yielded neither to strength nor to pride, an intimate humiliation that threatened to strip him of everything he believed himself to be. In a world that worshipped martial prowess, his body became a quiet betrayal. And the legacy he was meant to carry on, that never fully named sword, began to turn into weight, shadow, wound. She, Zahra, bound by blood and alliance to Hispanic royalty, fell under a different power, captivity. Held in the East for political reasons, she learned to survive in a land where beauty could be both weapon and sentence, where knowledge was passed in whispers and freedom had to hide beneath obedience. There, among veils and watchful eyes, her gift was transformed. Healing ceased to be only compassion, it became discipline, memory of the body, a conscious edge. Neither of them was free. Neither of them was whole. And yet something older than kingdoms, older even than the faith they claimed to profess, began to call to them. For there are legacies not inherited through blood, but through renunciation. There are swords that are not raised but veiled. And there are encounters that do not promise salvation, but demand it. In an age of holy wars and iron certainties, two souls walk toward an uncomfortable truth: that power does not always prevail, that faith does not always heal, and that only what is given without domination can transform. This is the story of what happens when strength fails, when gods fall silent, and when love dares not to be an idol. This is the story of the legacy of the veiled sword. Prologue. Mirepoix Castle, Normandy, 1108. The Oath of the Montferrant, the Legacy of Silence. The dampness of the crypt worsened the affliction gripping Isarn's hands. The cold seeped into his bones, and every attempt to move his fingers reminded him, with a sharp, dry stab, that his body was beginning to betray him. He remained motionless, his gaze fixed on the stone sarcophagus. The funeral passed without tears. The dead man's daughter, pale and worn down by successive pregnancies, leaned on her husband as though life itself weighed too heavily upon her. The silence was thick, almost reverent, laden with a past no one wished to name. That death did not close wounds, it merely covered them. The bishop prolonged a eulogy that rang hollow. Isarn thought that the man buried there had lived consumed by hatred, and that this bitterness had marked everyone around him. The crypt seemed built not only to house a body, but to preserve ancient resentments passed on like a dark legacy. Beside him, his father breathed with difficulty. He had aged quickly, and the journey had cost him more than he was willing to admit. Isarn felt the weight of what would come after the ceremony, not only the departure from the castle, but the void left by a history forcibly brought to an end. He thought then of the widow, of her obvious desire to abandon forever those stones laden with humiliation and violence. That impulse opened an unexpected possibility. His cousin needed someone to administer the inherited lands, someone trustworthy, someone capable of imposing order without cruelty. Isarn. The proposal had already been made, to assume control of the palace, to become the guardian of an inheritance no one wished to inhabit. In time, if he proved equal to the task, that charge could be transformed into a lordship of his own. A fragment of Normandy. As the coffin was sealed, Isarn understood that between death and silence, fate was offering him something he had never expected to claim. Not being able to wield a sword did not mean being excluded from power. Sometimes a legacy was not conquered through force but through endurance. Only one final approval remained. It would not be granted with joy. But the past, buried beneath cold stone, no longer had the right to govern the future. The stale smell of death and tallow candles threatened to stir the nausea Isabeau had been holding back for hours. She lifted her gaze to the vault of the crypt, avoiding the sarcophagus. She did not want to look back. That slight gesture drew her mother's attention, who immediately averted her eyes. Isabeau did not know what feeling dwelled in Adelaide, grief, relief, or simple exhaustion. She only remembered that years before, in a rare act of courage, she had saved the lives of her husband and her son. That memory was the only bridge that did not hurt. As the bishop repeated worn-out words, Isabeau thought of what would come next. Her mother could leave with them for Montferrant, far from prohibitions and shadows. Raoul had promised it. Perhaps it was not forgiveness, but it was a beginning. The past did not disappear, one learned to hold it without letting it dictate every step. Silence fell suddenly. The slab of the sarcophagus closed with a dull thud, and a cloud of white dust drifted through the air. The tomb was sealed. Isabeau felt that ending as something physical, solemn, the closing of an ancient wound. "It is over," Raoul said in a grave voice. "Balin of Tancarville will escort you out. I will help your mother." She nodded, wishing that this death might put an end to the enmity that had marked her life. She accepted Balin of Tancarville's hand with gratitude, though she missed the feel of her husband's arm around her shoulders. The great hall received them with a muted murmur. Servants waited by the tables, on their faces there was more relief than mourning. That castle had been a place without joy. Isabeau thought only of leaving, of returning to Montferrant where there was still room for life. Raoul returned with Adelaide, and gave her a wink. Isabeau was surprised when her mother smiled at her shyly. Raoul has asked me to go with you, she murmured. I do not deserve to be happy, but I would like to know my grandchildren, if you can forgive me. Tears finally came. Isabeau embraced her mother, and Raoul held them both firmly. In that silent gesture she understood that the true legacy was not stone or blood, but the choice, difficult and brave, to break the cycle of hatred. Raoul of Montferrant had long been thinking about the fate of Castle Mirepoix. It now belonged to his wife, and by extension was also his responsibility. That place, withered by years of rancor, called for order, care, and a firm hand capable of turning it into a living domain. He needed someone loyal. Someone capable. He thought of Isarn. His cousin accepted the proposal with that reserve that always surrounded him, as though nothing could ever fully excite him. Raoul knew how to read beneath that mask. Isarn burned inside at the idea of ruling Norman lands he had never believed possible. He also knew that illness had changed his character, that pain had made his silence harsher. What troubled him, however, was Isabeau's reaction. During the funeral banquet, Raoul lifted his gaze and met Isarn's eyes fixed on him, expectant and distant at once. He drew a breath and leaned toward his wife. What would you think of naming Isarn master of the palace? Isabeau, who had just tasted the roast chicken, choked slightly. She coughed into her napkin and glanced sideways at Isarn. He lifted one shoulder, unperturbed, as if the verdict did not matter to him, though inside he felt the old pull of pride. This land could be mine or slip away again. I trust him, Raoul added, resting his hand on his wife's back. Isabeau pressed her lips together. She thought of Mirepoix, of its entrenched sadness, and of what she longed to leave behind. I do not doubt his loyalty, she said calmly, but this castle needs patience, lightness, even humor. Isarn is not known for any of those virtues. Raoul shifted uncomfortably, under his cousin's ironic gaze. At times he is impatient. Impatient, she replied. He is abrupt and stubborn. Raoul turned his body slightly, giving Isarn his back. When the illness takes hold of him, he can be difficult. Isabeau sighed. Deep down she understood that pain. I like him despite everything. And I know he suffers. If you believe he is the right man, I will not oppose it. Besides, if my mother comes to Montferrant, she will scarcely see him. Isarn has no time for women. Perhaps that is why he never married. Raoul smiled, grateful for his wife's clarity. He breathed in her scent, rested his hand on the slight swell of her belly, and felt once again that honor could also be tenderness. He looked up. Isarn was already rising, taking his leave in silence and leaving the hall, his face closed and his thoughts aflame. Isarn climbed the steps of Castle Mirepoix two at a time. The cool evening air filled his lungs and for an instant the pain eased. From above, he surveyed his new domain. My land, he thought, startled by the force of the word. Fate had granted him something of his own, and his mind was already at work, an orchard of apple trees, repaired walls, solid moats. Mirepoix would prosper, he owed that to himself. He studied the ramparts, measuring cracks and shadows. He had feared Isabeau's refusal. He had never known how to deal with women. His deformed hands drew looks of pity or revulsion, and he had learned to harden himself. If they see me as a monster, so be it. It had not always been so. There had been a time when he was desired for his strength. That time was dead. It had cooled his ardor, convincing him there would be no wife for him. And yet, if he became lord, the question of heirs would arise, an inevitable echo. The pain stabbed back into his joints. He flexed his fingers without relief, and reassured a guard with a curt gesture. Will they accept me, he wondered. Will I be enough? He was not known for patience, but that land needed firmness and care. That he could give it. He closed his eyes and drew a deep breath. I will make this place the envy of all, he murmured to the darkening sky. And in that promise, harsh and sincere, his legacy was sealed. Chapter 1. Under a sky that does not divide. The cart lurched under the weight of its load, and an iron chest slid across the damp planks. Zahra reacted at once, forgetting her exhaustion, and lunged forward despite the layers of her eastern dress. She managed to stop it before it struck the bed where her lord lay sleeping. She held her breath, hoping that the tormented man would continue to rest. May sleep grant him the peace that life denied him, she thought with a quiet tenderness. She had barely slept since the journey began. The sea had rocked her with indulgence, but the overland passage from Massilia had been harsh, battered by rain and mud. More than once she doubted that her protector's wish, to die in the house where he was born, could be fulfilled. Fate makes promises and sometimes mocks them, she told herself without bitterness. The escort of knights kept bandits at bay. Zahra was grateful for their protection, though she did not know why they had taken her with them. She did not fear them as men, they had sworn to serve a sacred cause. But she distrusted silences. I have always been taken, never chosen, she remembered, with a calm learned through renunciation. The group halted without alarm. Zahra peered out from behind her veil. Sir Bertine of Lormont, steady in the mud up to his ankles, was issuing brief orders beneath the rain. The peasants struggled to right the cart, their bare feet slipping in the fertile earth of Normandy. She remained silent. She knew they would not ask for her counsel. Her presence was tolerated only if it proved useful. She recalled Massilia, the whispers about fortresses and commanderies. This journey was not merely a pious return. Bertine knows my true identity, she thought, and that knowledge weighed as heavily as the iron chests. When the wheel came free of the mud, a cry of relief ran through the group. The chests shuddered but held. The cart resumed its progress. Zahra retreated inside, breathing in the fresh air of Normandy. Even the rain seemed a blessing, after the stifling heat of Jerusalem. She made the sign of the cross, and murmured a prayer to the Christian God who for years had been denied to her. If I have come this far, she thought, it is because a destiny still awaits me, one I cannot yet see. Sir Bertine lifted his face toward the sky, and closed his eyes to shield them from the downpour. Rain ran over his helmet like a slow penance. He prayed that this setback would be the last. Zahra and the old crusader had been entrusted to him as part of a higher design. Of that he had no doubt. The will of the Most High is clear, even when it weighs like a poorly shared burden, he thought, feeling his patience slip through his fingers. Grant me patience and tolerance, he murmured, more to impose order upon himself than out of any soft devotion. He had been put to the test. How else to explain that God would choose a woman as an instrument of so lofty a plan? Bertine had never concealed his contempt for them, distractions, obstacles to the true purpose. And yet he forced himself to remember what mattered. It does not matter that she is a woman, it matters who she is. Zahra's rank, her veiled lineage justified her presence. Not her sex. He glanced at her sideways. She remained silent, gathered behind her veils while the men struggled with the cart. That self-control struck him, against his will, as acceptable. At least she knows how to obey, he told himself, with a severity that could not quite smother a certain unease. For Bertine knew that silence was not always ignorance, sometimes it was prudence. Within himself he clung to the simplest version of the journey, to return Gerald of Mirepoix to his ancestral home. That was how it should be. That was how it was to be understood. Not all the threads of the divine plan must be revealed at once, he repeated to himself, as the rain kept falling and the road, like faith itself, demanded that one move forward without seeing it whole. Chapter 2. Lineage and Promise. Isabeau watched the servants prepare the trunks for the return to Montferrant, and marveled at how much her mother had changed. 15 days in Mirepoix had restored to Adelaide a hope she believed lost. She spoke endlessly of the grandchildren she would soon meet. Isabeau thought of her own, of little Alexandra and the life that awaited them. Home, she told herself with a deep longing. Her unease at leaving Mirepoix in Isarn's hands had softened. Raoul had reassured her, and Isarn himself had spoken of repairs and plans with a restrained passion. She remembered how he had kissed her hand with infinite gentleness, even at the cost of pain. He too bears a wound, she thought. A servant interrupted her. "Milady, the Count requires you urgently in the great hall." Her heart lurched. Nothing must delay our return. As she entered, the air felt strange: iron chests, battered luggage, a worn greatsword, and a scent foreign to Normandy. Raoul stood waiting on the dais, rigid. Isarn was at his side, identical in bearing save for the gloves that concealed his afflicted hands. Before them, mud-spattered knights knelt at her arrival. Isabeau took her place between her husband and Isarn, feeling a mute threat ripple through the hall. Then she saw him, a frail old man supported by a veiled woman. Something in his face felt painfully familiar. "They are Hospitallers of St. John," Raoul announced, with a harshness that set her fear alight. Isarn watched the woman with taut attention, his gloved hand gripping his dagger. "Who are you?" he asked in silence. "We have brought back my Lord Gerard," said the knight who led them. The world wavered. Raoul steadied Isabeau. "My uncle. The lost crusader." The Hospitaller nodded, and gestured toward the woman. "She brought him to our hospice in Jerusalem. His mind was broken, but he asked only to die here, and he would not be separated from her." Isabeau recognized the blood of her blood in that defeated body. Indignation and compassion rose together. "Who is this woman who accompanies him to the end?" "Her name is Zahra," said the knight. And in that strange name, ancient as a promise, Isabeau knew that something irrevocable had just entered their lives. Chapter 3. Beyond the borders of honor. Raoul clenched his jaw. Once again the Mirepoix were upsetting everything, he thought, the old feud, the clan enmity, rekindling like an ember beneath ash. He worried about Isabeau, about the child she carried in her womb, and about the shadow Sir Gerard's return cast over a future they had believed, at last, to be calm. He respected the Hospitallers, but that journey from Jerusalem did not sit right. There is something they are not saying. And the woman with the strange name, one more mistake, he told himself, feeling Isarn's hopes hanging by a thread as well. Isarn, rigid at his side, gripped his dagger. Pain shot through his hands like lightning, but he did not take his eyes off the veiled woman. What spell is this? Zahra's presence disarmed him, not for what she revealed, but for what she concealed. Her eyes, deep and dark, were enough to unsettle him. "Control yourself," he ordered, ashamed of a sudden desire he mistook for anger. "Sir Bertin," he said, taking on the weight of the moment, "tell us more about my uncle, and about Zahra." She tensed at the sound of her name. She understands, Isarn realized, and for the first time he thought of her fear. Bertin spoke of Jerusalem, of sieges and rescues. Raoul interrupted. 8 years could not be erased with a single sentence. When harems were mentioned, the air grew sharp. "Are you implying?" Isarn stepped forward, cold creeping up his spine. Zahra lifted her face. "I am not a prostitute." Her voice, firm and clear, brought the hall to a halt. Isabeau faltered, and Raoul held her. Isarn, wounded in his pride, drew a deep breath. "Listen." "Speak," he asked. Zahra positioned herself behind Gerard, resting her hands on his shoulders with an ancient tenderness. She told of her mother's liberation, of a childhood born in captivity, of filial gratitude toward that knight who had been her refuge. Honor recognizes honor, Isarn understood, bewildered. "How did you survive?" he asked, and instantly regretted it. "By dancing," she replied without lowering her gaze. "Art not shame?" Bertin confirmed it. Isarn felt a veil fall away. "I judged without knowing." "Let them rest," he ordered. "Gerard is home. And you too shall have quarters, milady." Surprise flickered in Zahra's eyes. "Are you the steward?" "No," he said, straightening. "I am Garin de Seneville of Montferrant." Gerard stirred, clutching at the name like a plank in dark waters. And in that instant, Isarn knew that the legacy had returned with more weight than he had ever imagined. Chapter 4. Zahra, and the memory of steel. Zahra slipped out of her veil, and let the damp abaya fall. The chamber was poor, smelling of moisture and poorly laid rushes, but the clean sheets offered her an unexpected comfort. "I have slept in gilded cages," she thought with an ancient melancholy, "and yet this is freedom." She curled up on the bed, grateful for a silence that did not judge. She checked the trunks, the oils, the spices, the herbs, the remedies had all arrived intact. None of this must be lost, she told herself, clutching her duty like an amulet. She refused to think of the end that was drawing near for Gerard. Not yet. She sought out the marked chest. She removed the cloths, lifted the false bottom, and holding her breath, drew out the hidden weapon. The shamshir emerged without a sound, curved and beautiful as a revelation. Candlelight ran along the steel. My past does not abandon me, she accepted, pressing it to her chest. It was no longer a blade meant to kill, but it still carried the memory of its edge, and the vow never to be parted from it. She hid it again, with reverent care. The wind whistled in the corridor. Gerard at last was resting. Zahra pressed her forehead to the closed door. You have come home, she told him in silence. She remembered the old feud, the inherited fear, flight from Normandy as the only salvation. Blood does not forget, she thought with bitter clarity. Then the face of the lord of the castle rose before her, tall, dark, his hands hidden by gloves. What do you protect, she wondered. She had felt his gaze like a brief, unsettling flame. Not desire, not yet, but recognition. He saw me, and that was enough to unsettle her. She grew angry with herself. That Norman had judged her, like so many others. And yet she had spoken. I have said enough. She touched her fingers to the scar, memory of the siege, and let a tear fall. What would become of her now? Would she be accepted beside Gerard to the end? Or would she have to leave for Aragon, to claim a name that might bind her once more? I was not born to be a prisoner, she decided, as the tears subsided. Outside, the night kept its secrets. Inside, Zahra held hers intact, like a promise she did not yet dare to speak. Isarn lay awake in the darkness, the echo of that enough still vibrating through his blood. She should not have defied me, he told himself, and yet he knew it was not anger keeping him alert. That woman, veiled, strange, indomitable, had crossed the hall without lowering her head, and her challenge had ignited a fire he loathed to acknowledge. Rule the house, not desire, he reminded himself, clenching his jaw, as if that could master the pulse of his body. He reproached himself for his own weakness. No faithless woman should unsettle a lord of Montferrant, least of all with words stripped of fear. And yet the memory persisted, the dark fold of the veil, the lashes like shadows, the firm voice that asked no permission. It was not insolence, it was dignity, he admitted reluctantly, and that truth disturbed him more than the provocation. He drew a deep breath, forcing inner silence. He would rather die than confess that her presence had broken his discipline. This will stay with me, he swore, sealing the secret in the night, while the castle slept and honor, ancient and severe, demanded resistance against a flame that promised war. Chapter 5. The name the sword keeps. The arrival of the last mirepoix halted the departure, and forced the men to gather in the gallery. Isarn, attentive and silent, felt the weight of command before fully assuming it. Let them decide. Power asserts itself when it is not begged for. Claimant was direct, Gerard could not rule. Raoul proposed allowing him to die in his home, with Zahra at his side. The name alone unsettled Isarn, his pulse faltered. If he stays, my judgment will waver. If he goes, I will remain incomplete. Amid the doubts, Sir Bertine spoke. In measured tones he revealed that Zahra, though raised among infidels and dressed in the Eastern fashion, had been instructed in the faith of her ancestors. Her blood was Hispanic, and the veils a protection. Relief washed over Isarn like a granted prayer, yet a residue of unease remained. Protected from whom or from what? Bertine asked for patience and began an ancient tale. At Zalaka, he said, the Christian defeat opened a path of captivity for many women, among them, Maria Elvira of Tarazona, pregnant. From Morocco to Jerusalem, along roads of dust and sea, mother and daughter crossed kingdoms and destinies, until they fell into the hands of the power that preceded the fall of the holy city. Isarn listened with skin prickling. History is not past, it is a wound that breathes. When the hall had understood, Bertine concluded his proposal. Gerard would remain in mirepoix until the end. Zahra would stay with him and then be escorted to her inheritance. A murmur erupted at the word, kingdom. Isarn held his breath as the truth settled like an ancient seal. Zahra was the illegitimate daughter of King Sancho Ramirez of Aragon. Legacy calls to legacy, he thought, knowing that nothing in Mayapois would ever be simple again. Chapter 6. What honor demands. Bertine left the gallery with sober satisfaction. The meeting had had its effect. The Montferrants had been captivated by his account, and he had added to his memory the encounter with a hero of the First Crusade, worthy of being recalled another time. Words, when they serve a purpose, open doors, he told himself. He had preferred to remain silent about certain origins of Zahra, but he needed a plausible reason to bring her to Aragon without revealing the true aim, to deliver her to her half-brother, King Alfonso. He perceived clearly the clan's desire to see her depart. In particular, the so-called master of the castle, Isarn, displayed a tense haste to bid them farewell. Bertine watched him closely. His harshness, attributed to arthritis, did not entirely conceal another unease. That way of looking at her is not indifference, he thought, unsettled. Perhaps he had erred in mentioning the girl's purity. He had seen before how honorable men contorted at the thought of possessing what was untouched. From the threshold, Bertine held his silence as a vow. I will protect her from the desire of others and from my own, he promised himself, aware that the path ahead was made of long shadows. The legacy had been invoked, now it demanded caution. Chapter 7. The dance. The treatment of Zahra changed with a tense, almost reverent courtesy. Bertine has spoken, she understood without bitterness. She knew he had revealed only her lineage, not the truth born at sea, during that voyage from Morocco that her mother had taken to the grave. She was grateful nonetheless, that the Montferrants allowed her to remain beside Gerard until his death. I owe my life, she thought, and decided to repay the debt in the only way she knew, by dancing. Dance had saved her from madness. It was inheritance and refuge, the memory of the rhythm of her land. When she danced, Zahra was fully Zahra. Yet that night her pulse faltered at the thought of the lord of the castle, always gloved, always distant. Why does his pain call me? She felt the old fear, the power to soothe suffering once wielded, demanded too high a price. She perfumed herself with rose water, donned the dress sewn by her mother, and covered her face with a red veil. Let the wound protect the truth, she told herself. She fastened bells to her ankles, chose the castanets, and left the sword hidden. Behind the screen, silence thickened. At the first lament of the shawm, she drew a deep breath and entered the hall. Isarn felt the blow of the vision. The red figure moved like an omen. She revealed no more than she concealed, and yet it disarmed him. Control the body, he ordered himself, but the music carried him away. He saw grace, strength, a dignity dancing with an invisible partner. When her fingers jingled, he remembered his own ailing hands, and bitterness closed his throat. I am not worthy, he thought, looking away. The drum called the sword. The steel gleamed, and astonishment ran through the hall. Zahra spun, leapt, balanced the blade like a deadly halo. I am whole, she told herself, master of the rhythm. Isarn, exhausted, felt fear and fascination. When she knelt and raised the sword to her throat, the world held its breath. Applause erupted. Zahra searched for Isarn with her eyes. He rose, heavy with honor and desire. Thank you, he managed to say, a poor word for so much. Lysander came to her aid, and led her to her table. Isarn remained seated, conscious of others' judgment and his own. The legacy weighs, he thought, as the echo of the dance continued to beat in his heart. Chapter 8. The hands that no longer obey. Zahra no longer had an appetite, but she felt a nameless hunger within her. Her pulse still vibrated beneath her skin. The dance had demanded more of her than ever, and all but one seemed to understand. I danced for him, she thought, and the certainty hurt. Isarn had been her invisible partner, the chest close, the shared turn, the gloved hand holding her in a world that existed only while the music lasted. When she lifted her gaze and found his disdain, she decided not to look at him again. He does not want me here. Yet she caught him watching the sword, not her face, as if afraid of what he might see. She distrusted Bertine, and after Gerard's death, leaving for Aragon seemed an inevitable destiny. She rose. Lysander came immediately. "I am tired," she said in a low voice. As she spoke, she saw the master without gloves, massaging his deformed fingers, eyes closed from pain. The impulse overwhelmed her to kiss those hands, to recognize in them a sister wound. "I too know how to hide a mark." She looked away too late. Isarn was watching her. Isarn clenched his fists, burning. Too late. She had seen his hands. He expected repulsion and found compassion, and that wounded him more deeply. When Zahra left with Lysander, he slipped on his gloves and bade farewell with formality. "Do not expect," he ordered himself. His father accompanied him in silence. "Your mother will ask after you," he said at last. Isarn shrugged. Aymeric pressed with a firm hand. "It is not just the pain." Isarn yielded. "It is the woman. I did not see her face, and she has enchanted me." Aymeric smiled, remembering. Then he spoke of ancient fears, of Hastings, of allowing fear to govern life. Isarn rebelled, showing his hands. "No one will want this." Aymeric took them. "Everyone needs love. Your wound does not make you less worthy. She is not ordinary. Is it not worth the risk?" Isarn stepped out with his heart exhausted. The legacy weighs, he thought, as night closed over Mirepoix, and the echo of the dance continued to beat where honor and desire recognize each other. Chapter 9. The body as a border. Relief and anticipation lit Isabeau's face as they left Mirepoix. The trunks were already loaded. Adelaide de Mirepoix, for the first time in years, left the castle with a new light in her eyes. Isarn observed the silent complicity between Raoul and his wife, and felt the weight of a question he dared not voice. What would it be like to love like that, to trust like that? Isabeau had brought Raoul back to life after captivity, though the demon still haunted him in his dreams. Isarn knew those nocturnal screams, invisible in the daylight. Balin and Clement had already departed for England. The world moved on, leaving Mirepoix in new hands. Raoul took Isarn by the arm and drew him aside. "It is up to you now. I trust you will know how to breathe life into this place." The knot in Isarn's throat tightened immediately. "What does he see in me?" He gripped his cousin's hand. "I will not fail you." "Be cautious," Raoul warned. "They're fragile loyalties. We will reinforce the garrison." Those words let air back into his chest. "I will not be alone." Isarn spoke of promises kept, of men arriving from Falaise and Isle de Tataho. Raoul embraced him tightly. "I will send Anselme de Amaury. He is trustworthy." Isarn turned to Isabeau and bowed, measuring each gesture. "Farewell, cousin. Mirepoix will be safe." Raoul cut off any reply with brotherly severity. "You better make sure, or you will not be seigneur." The cart departed. Isarn remained alone before the walls, feeling the legacy settle upon his shoulders. To govern is to stay, he thought, as the castle seemed to hold its breath, waiting for honor to find its new voice. Chapter 10. The Invisible Wound. Zahra spent the days tending to Gerard, taking refuge in routine to avoid thinking about the departure. She knew that her presence, healing and foreign, had strained the castle's atmosphere. It pained her to have added unease to Isabeau's fatigue, and she wondered what wounds that woman had learned to keep silent within these walls. All the Montferrants longed to leave, except one. And that exception disarmed her. "Stay away," she told herself, aware of a dangerous alchemy. When they met, something ancient and burning awakened in both of them. The farewell was slow. Aymeric and Guerine took time mounting. The weight of years rested on bodies that had made history. Isarn watched his father, grey-haired, backbent, with a pride that tightened his chest. "You are still a giant." They said goodbye with simple words, heavy with inheritance. Guerine, already on horseback, left a warning wrapped in affection: care for the castle, and for Zahra. Isarn was left alone when the last banner vanished down the road. Isolation felt like a bell. "I chose this," he thought, yet fear bit at him. a lord who does not wield a sword must learn to govern with another kind of strength. As he turned, he saw her in the doorway. His breath caught. Not now. He turned back and walked away, fleeing from what made him feel exposed. Zahra had come without meaning to. Seeing him say farewell moved her. He had grown up surrounded by affection, she, in a world of shadows, shared with her mother. She felt the reckless impulse to help him preserve this place. He would not listen, she told herself. When Isarn saw her and stepped aside, tears brimmed in her eyes. Why does my heart beat this way? She wished to leave soon, before desire for a man who avoids her and still does not know her face became a wound impossible to close. Mayapwa fell silent, holding a nameless mourning between two souls learning to part. Chapter 11. Two Destinies in Shadow. For 15 days, Isarn barely saw either Gerard or Zahra. The castle now under his command demanded decisions and a future, turned fields promised grafts men who would learn to obey him. To be a lord is not to wield a sword, he told himself, trying to believe it. Yet Zahra's absence weighed heavier than any burden. The less he saw her, the more she besieged him. At night her dance returned like a spell, bringing with it a desire that shamed him and kept him awake. If Gerard dies she will leave, he thought, guilt and longing intertwined. I want to see her once. Just once. Meanwhile, Zahra tended the crusader in his chamber. She knew she would leave for Aragon when everything was over, and clung to that certainty like a harbor. Leaving is the right thing, she told herself, though the memory of the new lord, his silence, his pain disarmed her. One night, Isarn wandered the dark corridors when he heard a door and recognized her scent. His heart pounded. Do not run. He called her softly. Zahra paused, a shadow against the stone, unveiled. I must not let myself be seen, she thought, yet she did not leave. Do not come closer, she asked. Do not fear. It is I. Isarn, he replied, and hearing his name on her lips, Isarn, he felt something ancient awaken. Zahra confessed, her voice broken, that it was not fear that held her back, but shame. I am a burden. Isarn, driven by an urgency he could not understand, asked to see her face. She drew a deep breath and told the truth. She hid for the same reason he concealed his hands. The revelation left him frozen. What if I look at her and wound her with my rejection? He knew that abyss. He stepped back, cowardly and compassionate at once, and bade farewell in the darkness. As he walked away, he knew he had lost something he had never possessed, and Zahra, alone in the hall, understood that two marked souls could recognize each other even without seeing. Mayapwa kept that secret, just as it keeps the scars of those who dwell within it. Chapter 12. Before we meet. Zahra's knees gave way, and the cold stone received her like a judgment. She heard Isarn's door close, and with it something in her chest. Isarn, what a name for a warrior, she thought, wounded. Why did I long to see his face? Because he desired her. Like others before, for her eyes, for the veil, for the inaccessible. She had wanted to believe it different. She had sensed in him a pain her gift could ease. I can bear the price, she told herself. But the idea of a marked woman had held him back. She leaned against the wall, and sleep carried her back to the stormy sea when she was 10. The broken mast, a panic, Saif al-Din crushed on deck. Then came certainty, not fear, and her small hands took on another's pain. Lightning illuminated disbelieving faces, she did not scream. From that day she became untouchable, venerated, initiated into Al-Kindi's treatises. To learn is also to heal, she had understood. She awoke with a start in the corridor, and returned to her chamber. The past overlaid the present like another veil. She remembered Jerusalem, the saved library, Gerard's pledged word for her to study. Honor also protects, she thought. She loved Gerard for gratitude, and for the memory of her mother, Maria Elvira, whom he had loved with noble acceptance. The memories returned, though less sharply, the harem surrounded by the smell of burnt flesh, the silence that preceded the fall. The women knew. On the morning of the drawn swords, Maria Elvira hid her behind her body. Heads fell. Do not look, Zahra commanded herself, pressing her ears against her mother's back. Then came the impossible flight, the devil's face, the blade that split her cheek. Her mother's scream. The dull blow Saif al-Din struck down. A crusader lifted the great sword. Zahra thought she would die again. Maria Elvira pleaded in Spanish. The sword fell. The warrior's voice was strangely gentle. Relief overcame her. Now in mirepoix, Zahra tended her benefactor with steady hands and a quiet heart. I do not know how to heal resentment, she admitted, touching the scar beneath her veil. In the castle's dimness the legacy weighed like a promise, to heal without being seen, to love without being claimed, and to move forward with the dignity of those who survive. Chapter 13. The woman who listens to the edge. 2 days later, Gerald de Mirepoix died in peace. Zahra wept without sobbing, as she had learned to weep when no witnesses remained. She sent for Isarn and stayed kneeling beside the bed, her forehead pressed against the wood. Now yes, she thought with devastating clarity, there is no one left between the world and me. Isarn paused at the threshold. The old crusader's body seemed smaller than ever. He swallowed hard. Has he gone? He asked, his voice clumsy, inadequate for such a moment. Zahra lifted her face without rising. Her reddened eyes sought no compassion, only truth. Yes. He has gone without pain. And with him goes my last refuge, she thought, and the idea pierced her chest like a slow blade. Isarn took a step, then another. I don't know what to say. I never have. Still he reached out and touched her shoulder. The pain he had carried in his body for years poured into Zahra with the violence of an ancient tide. She gasped sharply, startled, and held him reflexively. Wait, she said, her voice a thread, do not pull away. Isarn withdrew his hand abruptly. Have I hurt you? He asked, alarmed. I did not mean to. No, she interrupted him, you have not harmed me. On the contrary. Then she looked at him with raw intensity, undefended. He is alive. The gift has not abandoned me. An almost jubilant emotion fought with grief. I can help you, she added, rising to her feet, not today as mistress nor as guest. As a woman who knows how to ease pain. Isarn backed until his spine touched the door. If I yield, there will be no turning back. He looked at her, small, firm, dangerous to his carefully contained world. You must not, he murmured, you have already given too much. I do not wish to be another burden. Zahra shook her head slowly. You are not a burden. You are, she paused, searching for the word, you are someone who recognizes another's pain because you inhabit it. That disarmed him. Zahra, he said, for the first time without a title, I do not know what you are nor how you do it. I only know that when you touch me, the world changes. Then let it change, she whispered, at least for a moment. Isarn closed his eyes and held out his deformed hands. If this is madness, let it consume me entirely. Zahra's warmth engulfed him, the pain receded like a wounded animal. He groaned, a low involuntary sound. By God, he gasped, it does not hurt. He opened his eyes to say more, but found Zahra trembling, her face contorted by an agony that was now his. No, he said harshly, not like this. Not at this price. He released her. Zahra fell to the floor, exhausted. Zahra! Isarn knelt immediately, taking her in his arms. Look at me. Do not dare leave me now. He carried her, almost running to his chamber, as if the entire castle could snatch her away. He laid her on the bed, surrounded by the scents of cinnamon and distant lands. Wake, he begged. I did not ask you to save me only to lose you afterward. She breathed. She slept. Relief bent his back. She lives. She lives because of me, and perhaps also for my sake. Without another thought, with a gesture almost like a prayer, he lifted the veil. The world ignited. A noble beauty, wounded and serene. A scar that did not deny her harmony, but consecrated it. Isarn felt a fierce hatred for the past, for the man who had dared to mark that face. I swear no one will ever touch you cruelly again, he murmured, not knowing to whom he promised it, no one. He bowed without touching her, as before a living relic. Then he felt the salty dampness of a tear, and realized Zahra had awakened. She opened her eyes. Isarn recoiled as if caught stealing something sacred. "Forgive me," he said, his voice broken, "I had no right." "Perhaps you did," she whispered, still weak. "Perhaps someone had to look and not turn away." Isarn could not respond. He fled. Not out of disdain, but out of fear of staying and never being the same again. Zahra closed her eyes once more, her heart racing. "I am no longer alone," she thought. And that is even more dangerous than solitude. Chapter 14. The fear of not being. The sound of Isarn's footsteps receding shattered something final in Zahra. So this is how it ends, she thought, convinced that the scar had driven him from the room. She wept until she was emptied, then with a dignity learned through loss, she rose without a veil. "I no longer have to hide." If he knew, there was nothing left to conceal. She gathered the oils brought from afar, and stepped into the corridor. She announced Gerald's death in a steady voice, the maid's eyes fixed on the scar. Zahra held her gaze. "Hurry," she ordered, and the girl obeyed. In the chamber, the old crusader looked small upon his bed. He died at home, she thought, even if that castle was made of ghosts. As she washed and anointed the body, the memory of the castle's tormented lord pierced her with a burning melancholy. "I will not forget him." And she resolved, with stubborn calm, to help Isarn whether he wished it or not. Isarn, occupied with the rites, delayed his return. "Do not flee," he told himself at last, and entered with men and torches. The air smelled of wax. Zahra, kneeling before him, seemed a vision held in time. Pale skin, almost luminous in the gloom, contrasted with the dark fall of her hair, black, very long, smooth as nocturnal water, loose over her back and shoulders. A red jewel, set with ancient delicacy, marked the center of her forehead. It did not shine, it burned. The dancer's dress, thin silks layered, embraced her figure with a ritual sobriety, closer to prayer than adornment. There was no ostentation in her, only presence. "I should have stayed," thought Isarn, and the thought came with something more unsettling, a faint tingling, forgotten awakening in the fingers of his bare hands. He, tall and broad-shouldered, still bore the Norman severity in his bearing, a body made for war, a face marked by travel and vigil, short beard, fair hair carelessly tied back. Simply dressed, he nonetheless looked like a warrior sent prepared for a trial greater than combat. Gerald lay arranged, as for a sacred vigil. "He is ready," she said at last, breaking the silence with a low, steady voice that asked no permission. Isarn approached, shaken. "Alone?" He removed his gloves and offered her his hand. Zahra took it, without hesitation. Her touch was warm, sure there was no pain. Only a calm current passing through him, as if the body remembered before the mind. "We are bound," he understood, not as a promise but as a fact. "It is I who must thank you," he murmured. "You eased my burden." Zahra lowered her eyes. In her restrained smile there was neither pride nor submission, but an ancient knowing, almost maternal. So it should be, she thought. And the world for an instant seemed to agree. They took up the Crusaders' sword, legacy and promise, and followed the bier to the crypt, arm in arm. Amid shadows and honor, the castle seemed to breathe with them, as if the past were granting leave to what was about to be born. Chapter 15. The name that calls me. For the second time in a week, Isarn descended into the crypt of Mirepoix, to bid farewell to one of the castle's children. This time, he stood alone among the Montferrants. As the bishop droned on with worn words about the glory of the Crusades, Isarn thought with uncomfortable clarity that one day his own body might rest there. Mirepoix or Falaise. For the first time the idea of his death did not seem abstract. Zahra faltered at his side. Without thinking, Isarn steadied her by the elbow. "I will not step away," he told himself, surprised by his certainty. She accepted the support with a brief inclination of her head. He does not let go, she thought, and that simple gesture bolstered her spirit more than any prayer. The funeral banquet was sober. Seated together on the dais, they looked like lord and lady of the castle, though whole worlds lay between them. Isarn let his gaze travel across the great hall, imagining future laughter, weddings, children running between renewed tapestries. Will there ever be joy here? Then he looked at her. Desire was not enough. I want to be chosen, he admitted bitterly. I want to be loved. His thigh brushed Zahra's. A low sound vibrated in his chest. She looked at him, amused and attentive. What thoughts make you growl like that, my lord? I dream that this hall will know brighter days, he answered honestly. Zahra rested her hand on his thigh. It will. You know how to tend what pains you. Warmth coursed through him. Isarn covered her hand with his, aware of the difference between them. She does not shy away, he thought, dazed. She added her other hand, as if sealing a pact. I have brought remedies and knowledge from the east. I can help you, if you allow it. Since you took my pain, he said softly, it has not returned. I cannot ask you to do that again. There are other paths, she replied. Let me try. If you can bear touching me. Your touch does not offend me, Zahra said, holding his gaze. A throat clearing pulled them back into the world. Isarn withdrew his hands. I need their respect, he reminded himself, wounded. He dealt with practical matters, feigning distance, yet he did not leave her alone. Zahra watched him. He flees and stays at once, she understood. Before dawn, Zahra waited in the corridor with a small vial or phial. He will not refuse if I offer it now, she told herself. When Isarn opened the door, his hand went to his dagger. Zahra? It is for your pain, my lord, she explained, holding it out. Al-Kindi recommends it, for weary spirits. Did you prepare it yourself? Yes. He smiled faintly. Tell me what it contains. She listed the ingredients lightly. He listened as one receiving a secret. He pocketed the vial. Call me Isarn, he asked. I am not your lord. But I want you to be, she thought, and only said. Take 5 drops with food. It carries honey. Thank you. He stepped closer and kissed her forehead. I will return before dusk. Zahra watched him go, her heart racing. This castle heals and wounds at once, she thought. And so do I. Chapter 16. Where strength fails. Isarn let 5 drops of the preparation fall onto the still warm bread. The taste was bitter, tamed by the honey. Whether it works or not, he thought, it has already done something no one ever did for me. Beside him, Arto raised an eyebrow. A remedy from Zahra, he murmured. One never knows. She knows more than she seems, Isarn replied, with a smile that slipped free of him. In many things. He did not understand why he had feigned skepticism. Perhaps because everything else had failed before, perhaps because admitting hope made him vulnerable. I trust her, he told himself, surprised. He stowed the vial and rose, flexing his fingers. The stiffness was easing. So this is what relief feels like. Let us set out, he ordered. First, have someone show Zahra the pantry. She can keep her medicines there. Arto nodded and went. Isarn hesitated for an instant. Cancelling the inspection and staying to help her would have been easy. And tempting. But duty weighed more. The castle demanded his steady stride, and his body for the first time in a long while answered. I must not stay where I cannot stay, he reminded himself. With a pang of desire he accepted without yielding. For a long time I believed my wound was my limit. I carried it as one carries a fate, without a name, without protest. I learned to move the body so as not to think, to dance with the sword so the pain would have a shape, and not devour me from within. I believed that was survival. But the wound did not want to be hidden. It wanted to be understood. It did not close all at once or by miracle. It became a path. Each conscious gesture, each sustained breath, each act of care taught me something simple and terrible. I am not broken, I am called. Healing did not return me to who I was before. It revealed who I had always been. I understood then that the body remembers, and that when it is listened to, it becomes language. My dance ceased to be defense and became offering. Chapter 17. Between two shores. Isarn returned in time for supper. Weariness weighed on his shoulders, yet his face was clearer, as if something old had loosened its knot. Zahra knew it before she heard him speak. He has taken the medicine. Relief swept through her chest with an almost fearful gratitude. It was not her place to occupy the dais in his absence, but when Isarn crossed the great hall he made a clear, intimate sign to her. Stay. She obeyed, feeling that the gesture placed her for an instant at his side in the world. I see you differently, Isarn, she said. More whole. He smiled, and that smile set her belly alight. I am alive, he thought, surprised by his own body. I rode for a long while. The pain returned, and then it yielded. Whatever it was in your preparation, it has given me back something I believed lost. Tell me, who is this sage you invoke? Zahra spoke of Al-Kindi as of a spiritual forebear, with contained pride. Isarn listened with reverent attention. It was not learning alone he heard, but lineage, a legacy passed down by women's hands in the penumbra. When she mentioned Jerusalem and the governor, his jaw tightened. Was it he who marked your face? She touched the scar without looking at it. It is not shame, it is memory. It does not steal beauty, Isarn said, lifting her chin with care. It declares courage. Only a vile man would do such a thing, and even so he let you learn, he left you intact. It was not mercy, she replied, her voice low. He believed he worked miracles. He used me. I saved his life, and that was enough. Isarn stopped eating. He watched her as if each word drew her nearer, and pushed her farther away at once. Child and savior, he thought, with a respect that ached. Did you know then that you could heal? I knew when I touched you, Zahra said. A luminous certainty entered me. And joy. Even with the pain. She held his gaze. Choosing you is also choosing myself. I was happy to carry it for you, she said. Even if only for an instant. Between them hung a dense silence, woven of honor, desire, and a power that asked no permission. In the great hall the voices went on, but something ancient had been named, and it could no longer be undone. Izzy shook his head, but he did not withdraw his hand. He wants to touch me, she understood, and that silent consent stirred in her an old longing, to know him beyond the mystery. He asked about her past, and Farah, with a serene melancholy, let memory speak. My mother still lives within me, she thought as she evoked Maria Elvira Tarazona, the forbidden love, the journey to Battalios, the capture for which she blamed not the beloved man but the pride of kings. She spoke her name like a relic. Izzy received it with respect, sensing that each syllable was a legacy. They spoke of Yusuf ibn Tashfin, stern warrior and just man, and of the price of survival. Izzy listened with his stomach in knots, looking at the children in the hall and vowing in silence that the world must never fail them again. Honor is protection, he told himself, and that certainty bound him to her. Farah stepped closer. Do you trust? The question trembled in her eyes before it reached her lips. Izzy, who had trusted only his blood, answered slowly, yes. He will not love me, he thought, even so I choose to believe. She smiled with luminous audacity, weighing the risk. Allow me to ease your pain tonight, she said, then at once drew the word back into safer ground. With oils, the hands. Nothing more. Izzy's world grew still. He welcomed that boundary as one finds a shore. They spoke of the pantry, of order, of ungents, of the calling that made her shine when she named herbs and remedies. Farah paused, embarrassed by her enthusiasm. Izzy, captive to that voice, rose with awkward resolve. You do not speak too much, he said. Go to the pantry. I will wait for you in my chamber. As the bench fell with a metallic echo, both knew they had crossed something invisible, not an impetuous gesture but a pact of trust. In the great hall lingered a grave and sweet promise, woven of honor, contained desire, and a legacy asking to be tended. Chapter 18. Between wound and light. Zahra did not feel the chill of the stone beneath her feet, as she walked toward the pantry, as if the entire castle were urging her on. What am I doing? The question throbbed at her temples, useless before a desire that had overcome prudence. Isarn de Montferrant was a Norman nobleman, strong in name and lineage, she, the bastard daughter of a distant king, marked by captivity. He is whole, I am wounded, she thought, and yet the longing did not yield. She had offered to ease his pain under an honest pretext, but an incomplete one. She wanted to touch him. She wanted to know with her hands what her heart had already recognized. The pantry door groaned as it opened. Zahra steadied herself for a moment, lifting the candle. The light revealed the jars lined up like ancient promises. Choose with honor, she told herself, knowing that every choice carried weight. She set the candle on the bench. Her fingers trembled as they moved over the oils, power, memory, solace. She took the violet and the infuser, accepting the risk with a newly born calm. She hesitated before the myrtle and withdrew her hand. Not yet. Not from fear, but out of respect for a time that asked to be awaited. She tucked the jars into a small pouch, picked up the candle and set out back. Her heart pounded in her ears, not with shame but with resolve. If I cross this threshold, she thought, let it be in truth. And she went on toward Isarn's chamber, carrying oils, flame, and a promise that asked for care as much as for courage. Chapter 19. The Healer of Steel. Isarn waited seated on the edge of the bed, aware of his own awkwardness. I do not fear battle, he thought, but I do fear this waiting. He wondered what to do with his body, with a desire that asked no permission. I will not force her, he told himself with a firmness learned in war. If Zahra had preserved her innocence amid harems and captured cities, it would not be he who broke it. He lay back, breathing deeply, as one preparing for a different kind of trial. The light knock at the door drew him from his reverie. Zahra entered with a candle, the light traced her face and a calm certainty crossed Isarn. This is not temptation, it is presence. He took the candle and extinguished it. The fire in the hearth was enough. His voice, rough with feeling, sought order. Should I sit or lie down? She smiled, reading his unease. Lie down and take off your boots. Zahra set a small pouch on the chest, and laid a hand on his shoulder. Trust, Isarn told himself, surprised to obey. He handed over the dagger and the belt, symbols of a man who for once did not need weapons. She set them aside with care, as one clears an altar. She lit an infuser. The ancient aroma filled the room, and Isarn's body yielded, muscle by muscle. So this is what peace feels like, he thought, incredulous. Give me your hands, Zahra whispered. He obeyed. She worked with firm, compassionate pressure, knowing where to touch. I do not take the pain, she reminded herself, I accompany it. Isarn closed his eyes. Desire changed its shape, it was no longer surge but shelter. Silence, she asked. Let yourself be. Zahra's hands found rhythm and memory. His own, marked by the sword, opened for the first time in a long while. Isarn floated light, with a gratitude that ached. When he opened his eyes again, morning was pouring in. Zahra was gone. What remained was the scent, the calm, and a wordless promise. This is not a spell, Isarn thought. It is a beginning. Chapter 20. The path that names us. Zahra knew Isarn would end up in the pantry, when he failed to find her, either in his chamber or in the great hall. I have been clever, she told herself, with a warm guilt. The oils she had left to infuse were stimulating, and he might grow angry if he understood it. But he had slept. A deep restorative sleep. That mattered. As she had adjusted his clothes so he might rest better, she had seen the serene beauty that emerges when hardness yields. She had wished to stay, to fold herself against his back like an ancient oath. She did not. She thought of Isarn's sword, too heavy for a body betrayed by pain. There are other blades, she recalled, and kept the thought as one keeps an inherited secret. Good morning, or good afternoon, he said from the pantry doorway. Zahra turned. How much has he seen? He wore no gloves, she did not hide the scar. They looked at one another without refuge. You needed rest, she replied firmly. Isarn moved along the shelves, smelled one vial, then another. The markings told him nothing, but the scent did. This led me to peace, he thought. It is this one, he said at last. The same as last night, Zahra admitted. You have a keen sense of smell. I will not forget that perfume. There was a silence heavy with unspoken things. He moved toward the door, stopped, his back tense. To ask is to expose oneself. I thank you for your touch, would you come again tonight? Zahra felt the room spin. It is improper. It is inevitable. It will be a pleasure to attend to you, Isarn. He breathed deeply and left. Zahra braced herself against the table. Tonight, she decided, the myrtle. And in that choice already burned a legacy that was asking for a name. Chapter 21. The Tremor of Stone. Isarn paced the room like a caged wolf. Supper had left him raw. Sitting beside Zahra and feigning attention while desire burned through him was a trial of honor. I give myself away, he thought, recalling Odin's look and his father's warning. He loosened the dagger and braced his hands on the wood. There was no pain. But these hands. He feared what they might ask if she guided them beyond relief. Memory returned like a perfume, loosened clothing, deep sleep, and euphoria without cause. Was it the oil? He had drunk nothing but the elixir. Or perhaps it was her. He opened the door before she could knock. Zahra startled, the sack fell. They knelt at the same time. Do not break anything, she told herself, relieved. Forgive me, Isarn said. Let me help you. They rose with their hands joined too close. The air filled with an ancient scent, deeper than before. Isarn breathed it in and knew he must restrain himself. You intoxicate me, he murmured. You have enchanted me. Zahra stepped back, firm and trembling at once. This is not sorcery, it is care. She lit the infuser. He fell silent and obeyed the quiet. Remove your shirt, she asked, holding the alabaster. Myrtle. Sacred unguent. Isarn burned as he bared himself. Let my body remember what it was made for, he thought. She looked, then looked away, but the glint betrayed her. He saw it and kept that spark as a vow. Zahra set her hands at his neck. Let him sleep, let him heal. The cool of the myrtle, the warmth of skin, a moan. The oil sought sleep, but it also opened old griefs. Perhaps it heals us both. Isarn yielded, smiled without opening his eyes. She bore the weight of desire, as one bears a relic. When he slept, Zahra fell to her knees. She took his hand and brought it to her scar. This too is me. She kissed those fingers and left them upon her chest. The myrtle kept breathing in the room, like a legacy that had found its name. Isarn woke dazzled by the sun, his body still surrendered to the scent that lingered in the room. Where am I? Slowly the night returned to him, the myrtle, the relief, the yielding. There was no pain in his hands. One of them, hanging over the edge of the bed, rested on something warm and alive. No. He turned slightly and saw her. Zahra slept curled beside the bed, her breathing gentle, her face soothed by an ancient beauty almost sacred. Madonna, he thought, and honor weighed on him like armor. His hand covered her, his blood flared. Do not move. He feared waking her and losing an instant he did not deserve. What will she say when she sees my fingers? She stirred in her sleep, desire flooded him, and he lowered his gaze to master himself. Hold fast. When he lifted it again, Zahra was watching him, awake, with a quiet fire. I know, her silence said. He opened his mouth, awkward. She sat up slowly and placed a finger on his lips. Not now. She handed him his shirt, smiled with melancholy, the smile of one who guards a legacy, and withdrew without turning her head. Isarn was left alone, breathing deeply. Honor first, he told himself, seeking relief in stillness and in the discipline of the body. The scent of myrtle lingered, like a promise not broken, only deferred. Chapter 22. Learning to release the sword. Zahra waited in the shadows of the pantry, her body still marked by a deep and strange sleep. The myrtle has conquered me too, she admitted silently, while the memory of Isarn's hand, that hand belongs to that place, ran through her blood like an ancient flame. She desired and held back, she knew that longing promised no future. Aragon calls me, she told herself, though the idea no longer tempted her. The soft sound behind her announced Isarn before she saw him. Don't look, she thought, regaining composure. He entered with his bag pressed to his chest, uncertain. Don't name the night, Zahra commanded herself. Good morning. How do you feel? Well, he answered. You forgot this when you left. The Spanish slipped from her like an open wound. Isarn smiled, uncomfortable, and sought refuge in neutral words. Let's talk ointments, he thought. Of what does not burn. She explained the myrtle, its root, its patience. Then he saw it. The sword rested like a living legacy. Here, Isarn felt, here beats my craft. He asked to touch it. Zahra agreed, relieved. Let the blade say what I keep silent. He grasped it with reverence, light, precise, made for his hand. The warrior awoke. This is how he should fight. He executed a couple of moves, the blade sang. He asked its origin. The name weighed heavy on her voice, he understood the price. If only he could erase that wound. When he tried to return it, Zahra stopped him. I want you to use it. The dance had given it life again. The fear of losing her pierced him. I wish you would not leave. Me too. They looked at each other, knowing that honor draws boundaries harder than desire. He sheathed the sword carefully. I promise nothing I cannot keep. She adjusted the belt, trembling. Perfect, she whispered. Isarn withdrew toward the training field. Let the steel hold me, he thought, carrying with him not just a sword, but a bond that was already legacy. Chapter 23. Kader. Since Zahra walked beside him, Isarn felt a constant fire, not just desire but life, and to his surprise a deep healing of body and spirit. The fevers eased, the fatigue loosened, illness seemed to retreat under the steady pulse of her care. I am coming back to myself, he thought, with a hope he believed extinguished. She urged him to walk far from the training fields. Strength also learns to be light, she insisted. Isarn began going back and forth on foot to the village. Greetings replaced suspicion. To govern is to be seen, he understood. Sometimes Zahra accompanied him. They walked in fertile silence, and she asked precisely about that old fever that had broken him at 20. Here everything began, she said. Isarn nodded, and something finally settled in his memory. Someone names me without fear, he felt. The nights were slow to return. Isarn wished time would keep them away. Zahra transformed the castle's life with simple wise gestures, fatty river fish, soothing baths, discreet splints for the hands. Caring is a form of command, he thought, letting himself be guided. He agreed to swim in the lake. He ordered everyone to do the same. Laughter replaced mistrust, and the common spirit rose like an invisible banner. They are mine, he finally knew. With steadier hands, Isarn trained with Zahra's sword. The light blade obeyed him. This weapon knows me, he felt. He never parted from it. The men defeated at Mortain regained respect and purpose. The field thrummed with new enthusiasm. Zahra watched silently. If he heals, what will become of us? Isarn, meeting her gaze, understood without words. If I survive, it will also be because of her. Kader, destiny, offered no promises of endings. Only a shared legacy, made of care, honor, and a hope that walked again. Chapter 24. The weight of another's faith. Zahra had spent her childhood bent over ancient texts, learning to read the secret pulse of plants and pain. It had not been easy, but now, watching Isarn's recovery, she understood the meaning of the gift she had received. This is what I was trained for, she told herself, and the thought both wounded and comforted her. Isarn de Montferrant was her destiny, not to possess him, but to save him, and accepting that truth demanded a silent renunciation, not to love, not to cross the threshold of intimacy, no matter how desire burned within her like an unspoken prayer. Still she dreamed. She saw him laughing in the lake, water splashing like forbidden joy. She imagined brushing wet hair from his face, responding to a kiss that never came. She knew she would be judged, and yet how sweet it would be. Isarn's treatment confused her. He wanted her to stay, but why? Say just one word, she longed. Give it to me so I can stay. He, for his part, remained silent, with a gravity that hid his own struggle. If I speak, I bind her. If I stay silent, I lose her. Bertine would return soon. The name tightened the air, and Zahra begged forgiveness for the dark thoughts that assailed her. If he doesn't come back. Too many ifs. Then she remembered her Saracen teachers and the firm thread of Qada. What is meant to be will be. She repeated it like a charm. And between one breath and another, her mother's voice rose clear and ancient. Have faith, my daughter. Zahra closed her eyes. Between fate and faith, she chose to keep healing, even when her heart claimed its own wound. Chapter 25. Where the tremor dwells. Bertine de Laumont left Mont Saint-Michel, with the courtesy of a satisfied man, and the unease of one who keeps a secret. He had promised fortresses and aid, but his thoughts were already sailing toward another mission. There is no rest for those who serve fate, he told himself, avoiding the mention of a name that still stirred shadows. The Cantabrian Sea punished him mercilessly, rocking prayers, confessions between bouts of vomiting. If I must die, let it be in obedience, he murmured, until the coast of Benahanum appeared like absolution. From there on horseback he crossed hills and plains until he reached Huasca. Before Alfonso of Aragon he bowed his head. The widowed queen, rigid as a statue, pierced him with a chilling gaze. The king spoke with restrained anxiety. He wanted news of his lost sister. Bertine answered with measured truth. She was alive, eager to return. May faith uphold what politics strains, he thought, mentioning the father's sign. Alfonso brought his hand to his neck, and an ancient emotion broke his voice. A sister. They walked together, away from ears. Alfonso confessed the remorse of the late king, the fear of dishonor, the daily prayers. Bertine assured purity and miracle, hands of God, dignity preserved. May the word heal what war broke, he said. The king, a warrior of legend, nodded silently. Destiny, that capricious lover, had placed a fragile truth in his hands. Back in the hall, Alfonso promised gold and something more valuable than gold, favor and time. Return for Oriane Elvira, he said. There will be a celebration. Bertine withdrew with a bow, relieved by the promise of hot water and a razor, but above all by the weight of a sealed pact. The mission continues, he thought, and the legacy demands patience. Chapter 26. The Forbidden Closeness. Félicie de Rougemont traced the cross over her chest 3 times as she watched the French knight leave the throne room. Behind the backrest, invisible, beat the secret chamber she had never revealed to her son. Some truths uphold a kingdom only if they remain hidden. She stifled the urge to spit. A single sound would be enough to alert Alfonso, still motionless on the throne, trusting in a faith that no longer protected her. She had never believed the bastard daughter of her husband would return from the dust of the world. Bringing her here was opening a wound, she thought, love for her son mingling with an ancient fear. Alfonso, she knew, could not see the political edge, factions lurking in Aragon and Navarre, cracks ready to fracture unity. Without a united front, the war against the Moors would be lost. And if Alfonso fell, what would become of her? The shadow of the cloister chilled her spine. Her ecclesiastical enemies would not hesitate to lock her behind pious walls. Alfonso, for his part, remained serene, believing in miracles and inherited marks. A sister is a gift, he repeated to himself, seeking redemption in their father's past. Félicie did not share that hope. Princess, she scoffed silently. An unbeliever will not cross my doors. For her, legacy was not tenderness but control, peace, and architecture of silences. And in that dark calculation the threat became certainty. Some truths die before they are born. Chapter 27. Leaving the heart. Zahra's spirits lifted as she saw Isarn regain his health, and with it, a new dignity the castle was beginning to recognize. His skill with the shamshir commanded respect, his character now tempered inspired loyalty. If he flourishes, maybe this place will too, she thought, even though Mirepoix remained a shadow. dirty reeds, cobwebs, spoiled food, the persistent smell of animals. I wasn't born for filth, she told herself, remembering that even a harem without freedom honors cleanliness. Odin, diligent with rents and supplies, knew nothing of domestic skills. Zahra kept silent out of caution. She didn't want to hurt Isarn or provoke punishment, until chance spoke. Isarn stepped in excrement on the way to the Great Hall. A flush crossed his face, she smiled tenderly. Good thing it wasn't the king, she said lightly. You're right, he admitted, sniffing the air as if discovering it for the first time. This place needs remedy, Zahra suggested, gathering the women. Isarn resisted. I won't make her serve, he thought, jealous of her honor. She held his gaze. My blood doesn't define me, my dignity does. Let me help, she asked. Let's make Mayapwa a home. He laughed, remembering Jerusalem and its filth. He opened his arms. There will be no such thing here. Do your best, milady Oriane Elvira. The name pierced her. That's how I sound when I belong, she felt. She stood and brushed her lips against his, the hallway filled with gentle whispers. Isarn pulled her close, forgetting ranks. In his presence I lose myself. The kiss was deep, restrained and bold. Newly discovered desire filled her without words. As they parted, they breathed together. Forgive me, he whispered. I forget who I am. There's nothing to forgive, she replied. Isarn de Montferrant. Hand in hand, they climbed to the platform. Watch your step, he joked. And for a moment, Mayapwa breathed a future. Chapter 28. Learning to trust. For a week, Mayapwa swirled like a whirlwind of hands and laughter. The women of the castle and the village answered Zahra's call, obeying with a fervor that felt ancient, scrubbing stone and wood, washing fabrics, chasing away shadows. She moved lightly, her hair wrapped in an Eastern turban and wide trousers that made her free. This is how I work, this is how I breathe, she thought. In Mayapwa, they saw her as a foreigner. In her bearing was the memory of Jerusalem. Isarn sought her out on any pretext, captivated by that bold outfit. Don't look, he told himself, and looked. She returned his gaze with a mischievous smile, knowing her presence unsettled hierarchies. The corridors filled with voices, fresh reeds scented the stone, tapestries regained their color, and the kitchen was finally worthy of the bread it baked. The food improved and with it spirits lifted. Isarn watched with pride as Zahra led, without ever rising from the most thankless work. She rules without a throne, he thought, and that thought pained him. Odin helped with relief, even the high beams were cleaned. Mayapwa seemed to awaken. It will be sadder when she leaves, Isarn admitted, feeling the weight of that certainty in his chest. Zahra, for her part, burned with the desire to make the castle a beloved place. It calls me, she thought, surprised by the sense of belonging. She had come home, and yet she knew she could never truly belong. She loved Isarn with a silent intensity, but nobles do not love without price. His world of counts and alliances had no room for a woman marked by life and dressed in freedom. She owed nothing to the unknown brother. Yes, instead, she owed the love her mother kept for Sancho Ramirez. For that legacy, for that debt of the heart, Zahra decided to leave for Aragon. Honor is also farewell, she thought. And Mayapwa, clean and alive, learned to miss her before losing her. Chapter 29. The Worn Stone. Burton's return to Mayapwa was a journey of dust and caution. He avoided the sea and trusted the land and the cross he wore on his chest. What is controllable saves, he repeated to himself. When he crossed the castle threshold, he immediately sensed the transformation: diligent hands, clean rooms, scented reeds, hot water. Everything was working. Too much, he thought, uneasy. The answer came with Zahra. Without veil, unafraid of her scar, she moved like the lady of the place. She spoke with servants and knights with an ancient ease, as if lineage flowed from her voice. She has risen, 13 understood, and that dignity alarmed him. Then he saw Isarn, firmer, more whole, even cordial. Between them vibrated a silent alchemy. Zahra's shamshir at Montferrant's side stirred his bile. This wasn't in my plans. When Zahra saw him, she felt the chill of threat. He wants to take me, she knew. She had made Mayapwa her home, her kingdom of care, but Isarn had not promised her love. "I will not be nameless desire," she vowed. Bertin's exhausted face spoke of secrets, his gaze of possession. Isarn, as master of the palace, received them with honor. They will lack nothing, he thought, proud of the order Zahra had sown. Bertin's disdain and his fixation on the sword wounded him. When the hospitaller took Zahra by the arm, Isarn reacted before thinking. The naked blade raised a boundary. "Let her go," he said, low and firm. "I am in charge here," he told himself, trembling but unmoved. Zahra intervened, her voice calm, her heart suspended. Bertin spoke of guardianship, Isarn of protection. The castle, renewed by her love, seemed to listen. "We leave tomorrow," Bertin declared. Zahra bowed her head and obeyed. Isarn felt the knot tighten. Why give everything if you plan to leave? In Mayapwa, honor had awakened, now he learned the weight of loss. Chapter 30. Crossing unarmed. A soft knock at the door pulled Zahra from her weariness. The saddlebags were ready, each chosen item had been a sacrifice. "I'm leaving," she told herself, and her heart responded with a crack. She knew who waited before opening. Isarn had come to return her sword. He appeared with a smile that couldn't quite hide the devastation. He held out the shamshir, as if offering more than just steel. "I don't know how to say goodbye," he thought, and that silence weighed on his shoulders. "I will never be able to thank you enough," he began, his voice breaking. Zahra placed her hands beside his, feeling the shared warmth. "Tell me you need me," she wished without saying it. "I know what this has meant," she whispered. Time stopped in that touch. Isarn spoke of the castle, of life restored, of the laughter that would be missed. "Say it for me," Zahra urged silently. He brushed the scar on her face with an ancient tenderness. "Never doubt your beauty. I will carry you with me," and in that contained promise was everything he dared not say aloud. The kiss came like a wordless confession, intense, irrevocable, yet incomplete. "Stay," she cried silently. Isarn pulled away with effort, breathed deeply and chose flight. "I must leave before dawn." "Safe travels," he said, leaving before courage could betray him. Zahra stored the sword as one would hold a heartbeat. "He leaves me to save me," she understood through tears, surrendering to sleep with his name on her lips. Outside, Isarn pressed his forehead against the cold stone. "I am not worthy," he chastised himself, prisoner to ancient fears. He struck the wall and left there what he could not say. He vowed to remember, the laughter, the dance, the strength she had returned to him. "I will be lord of Mayapwa," he swore, "because she taught me how." And with that legacy he kept walking. Chapter 31. Walking into the uncertain. Isarn's absence at the farewell was an open wound for Zahra, and yet at dawn she silently thanked him. She heard him pause at her door and then walk away. "It hurts less this way," she told herself, even though the tears persisted. In the courtyard the horses waited and Bertin pressed with plans and routes toward Amboise, but Zahra knew she had to settle two debts first, with the castle that had welcomed her and the man who had restored her faith. She went down to the crypt, and knelt before the tomb of Gerard de Mayapwa. The stone was cold. "Honor is paid with memory," she thought, leaving a prayer of gratitude for the love he and her mother had given her. Then she crossed the pantry, brushing past the bottles of oils as if touching an ancient rosary. She inhaled the scent of violet and with her eyes closed, called upon Isarn without naming him. "May my memory hold you when I am gone." Her hands traced a small ritual, a contained dance, more promise than desire, until her pulse faltered and she steadied herself on the bench. Then she untied the shamshir from her waist and left it there, where he had first grasped it. She stroked the leather with reverence. "This steel holds what I couldn't say," she thought. "With all my love, Isarn," she whispered. "Use it in good health. Remember me, my love." The castle breathed with her. Outside the hooves waited. Zahra stood and walked away, carrying the invisible legacy of what had been shared, certain that even if their paths parted, memory would remain a bridge. Chapter 32. Where the map ends. In Huasca, beneath the vaulted throne room, Queen Mother Failishi summoned Lope Fortune, and watched his entrance with a mix of mockery and calculation. Power doesn't shout, it slips, she thought as the man strutted in, useful and dangerous in equal measure. She needed him for the unnameable. I entrust you with a task, she said, her voice tight with feigned honor. Matthias smiled, sensing the risk. Blood pays well when it's not your own. A woman is coming to Aragon. She must not arrive, Failishi ordered. The kingdom before the truth, she repeated. The mission had to seem like the work of infidels, far from Yaka, along pilgrims' paths. When he heard Hospitallers, Matthias tensed his beard. Killing those bound by oaths has consequences. Still, he accepted. Failishi dismissed him, relieved. The secret is a dagger wrapped in velvet. Behind the throne, Alfonso listened. She loves her son, but she loves her fear more, he thought, holding back his anger. He would not allow his half-sister's murder, or Matthias's advance toward the crown. He summoned his own far from the palace. Beltron, I give you command, he said firmly. Justice is woven too. Weave the net. I want to know who it touches, who it buys, who it kills. He ordered absolute silence about the Queen Mother. Blood must not stain the lineage, he thought, pacing tirelessly. He had suggested to Bertine the route through Yaka, and a visit to the monastery of Saint John de la Peña. Now the question burned like a vigil. Where will Garcia strike? Fate, ancient and cunning, had already chosen its crossing. Chapter 33. The weight of inheritance. After Zahra's departure, the castle of Mirepoix hung in a long shadow. Nothing will ever be the same, Isarn repeated to himself, until the arrival of Anselm de Amaury opened a crack of light. They embraced in the courtyard. Their camaraderie carried the weight of well-tempered iron and shared memory. I still know how to recognize my own, Isarn thought, grateful and weary. They spoke of Normandy, old loyalties and inherited hatreds. Anselm, hardened by crusades, named Cleto, France, Anjou, each name a warning. Isarn listened with a sharp mind but a distant heart. I will watch the men, but my vigilance lies elsewhere. They agreed to work at dawn. Before that, a bath and dinner. The castle, they said, no longer smelled of confinement. Isarn nodded. She had left her trace of light. The Spanish princess, is she gone? Anselm asked tactfully. Isarn took a deep breath. If I say her name, the wound opens. She left with the Hospitallers. It is her destiny. And yours, his friend replied, looking at him. Where is it now? The confession came like a broken breeze. He did not feel worthy. These hands, Isarn thought, hardened by war. Anselm did not press. Silence spoke the essential. It is too late, Isarn accepted, as one surrenders to winter. Days filled with training and cautious suspicions followed. Still, the night conquered him. He slept while she kept watch, he remembered. He searched for the oils in the pantry, and the scent disarmed him. He whispered her name. Then the light, the shamshir left with love. The world shattered and reassembled in an instant. She chose me, he understood on his knees, the blade at his chest. The legacy fell into place like an ancient map. Nothing mattered without her. Late that hour, Isarn went to find Anselm. The path was set. Chapter 34. Desperate journey. Zahra rode for days across plains and forests that promised peace, but her body and spirit were at war. I was not born for this saddle, she thought, biting through the pain, she who had crossed seas and carts, not mounts. In Amboise they found shelter beneath the tomb of Saint Martin. There was no relief. Lying on the cold stone, she hid her tears. Keep moving forward, she ordered herself, though every heartbeat pushed her back. Bertine fed on devoted glances among the pilgrims. He left her alone with her fever. On the road to Chauvigny, among ancient graves and damp lime, Zahra trembled. My heart does not belong to this path. In the mocking capitals, she read her failing. She had neither confessed nor rebelled. She closed her eyes and saw Isarn finding the shamshir. Let the steel speak what I kept silent, she told herself, and that certainty sustained her. After endless days, Oloron rose with its hills and beyond the Pyrenees. On the other side, a name she had almost forgotten, she thought in her mother's tongue. Alfonso awaited her, they said. She feared the holy war and the judgment of her own. Crossing the cathedral's portal, a premonition shook her. Tomorrow, the mountain. Isarn tried to leave alone. I won't drag anyone else into my urgency, he told himself. Anselm didn't give in. The pilgrim's path demands 2 swords, he answered firmly. And I owe you one. Isarn tightened the reins. My poir will endure, I won't. They set off together. In Shay, Agnes greeted them with the warmth of shared blood. They laughed, recalled shortened names and old summers. This is how a living home sounds, Isarn thought, and memory ached. Learning that Bertine had passed through stirred suspicion. He doesn't speak of her because he's plotting, he concluded. You found love, Agnes said, taking his hand. The heart decides, not the wounds. Isarn held her gaze. If the heart rules, I'm already late. Lucas asked to see the sword. Isarn hesitated. While I hold it, she's with me. He handed it over briefly and took it back right away, like guarding a vow. At dawn they would continue. The road was no longer just a chase, it was legacy and risk, honor and promise. I will reach her, Isarn thought, and the steel seemed to agree. Chapter 35. The majestic Pyrenees. Following the trail of the Hospitallers was simple. Wherever they had passed, a trail of memory remained. Isarn and Anselm moved with restrained urgency. They were only a day apart. A day can save or lose a life, Isarn thought, shuddering at the image of Zahra sleeping among tombs, fragile, perhaps ill. The monks remembered the nights. Of the woman they said little, except her weakness. She endured a harshness even he wouldn't have resisted, and anger against Bertine burned inside him. Did he even know how to ride? Their passage stirred whispers. Isarn's foreign sword and Anselm's cross commanded reverence. Holy land, they said. Seeing Isarn's blistered hands, the pilgrims whispered miracles. I'm not seeking miracles, he told himself, I'm seeking a woman. In Blay they learned the roots, Valcarlos or Somport. Anselm lied calmly, a brother, an inheritance, and the truth emerged, Oleron Yaka, a monastery. Isarn clenched his teeth. The mountain decides. Lope Fortune knew the Pyrenees like one knows a scar. Somport was trade and danger. Canfranc its stone gorge swallowed bodies with the Aragos Flumen River. This is where it ends, he decided. He paid the thieves, promised silence and gold. Better to blame wandering infidels than leave a trace. He took only Nego the wolf, hunter and scavenger feared by bandits. They will obey, Mateus smiled, or they will learn. In Huasca, Alfonso found no rest. My blood is walking into a trap, he thought. Beltran reported, Mateus was traveling alone with the wolf. The queen mother remained silent. Too clean, the king concluded. When he heard thieves, the idea struck like steel. Canfranc. The bridge, he said, already moving. Prepare 20 men. We leave in an hour. The mountain waited, ancient and stern. In its steps crossed honor and betrayal, love and death. May we arrive in time, Isarn thought, and the wind from the peaks seemed to listen. Chapter 36. The inner path. Years spent in warm climates had not prepared Zahra for the sharp cold of the mountains. After endless days and damp nights, exhaustion had gnawed at her will. What awaits me in Aragon, she wondered, fear knotting her stomach. She looked at Bertine weakly. Why didn't I challenge him when I still could? He strutted among the pilgrims, raising his voice against rumors of bandits, promising protection with a hollow confidence that echoed through the narrow valley gorge. The climb from Oleron was at first gentle, then cruel. At the Somport Pass beneath the Great Cross, they stopped before the Hospital of Sancte Crucis. Zahra longed to take refuge there, a little warmth, a little rest. Bertine never left her side. He saw her pallor, her trembling, and still pushed her forward. He boasted of his knowledge of fortresses and roads, pointed to Campus Anchor in the distance, and proclaimed triumphantly, "From here it's all downhill." To Canfranc. Hours later, Isarn and Anselm knew they were close. The river guided them toward the heights. Isarn burned with rage as he remembered the monk's words. Zahra was a ghost. They are killing her while she lives, he thought, guilt gnawing at his chest. She was happy in my apoir. She belonged to me, or I to her. Even exhausted, they quickened their pace. And when we catch them? Anselm asked, shielding himself from the wind. Isarn tightened his grip on the shamshir. Don't tremble now. I'll do what's necessary. If Bertine doesn't free her. At the summit, they dismounted and knelt before the cross. Isarn prayed as he never remembered praying before. Protect her. Let me reach her. Tears froze on his cheeks. Anselm saw and fell silent. Before descending, Isarn hesitated. I mustn't drag him into this. This is not your fight. Anselm met him with eyes on fire. I am your knight. And I won't return knowing I lost you and Zahra. Isarn gave in. They mounted again. Below them the gorge of Canfranc yawned dark and ancient. May honor guide us, Isarn thought. The wind answered, as if the mountain was listening. Chapter 37. Where the body learns to believe. Lope Fortune watched his work with cold satisfaction. He had bought off the bandits and once done took command. The Aragos Flumen River roared, masking every other sound. The stone bridge was a perfect bottleneck. Everything will end here, he thought, confident in the deadly choreography he had arranged. When he saw the woman, the king's bastard, he did not see a princess. Her head was bowed, her body defeated. She won't even make it alive to Wasker, he murmured to the wolf. They waited. First, for everyone to be on the bridge. Zahra lifted her face as the world's rhythm shifted. The roar of water beneath her feet, the restless horse, a muffled scream that wasn't the river's. Something breaks, she felt. Shadows emerged from the bushes, steel sang. Bertine shouted, but his voice was lost. A dark-skinned noble advanced toward her from the other side, plume waving, eyes full of death. Is this the end? The horse reared and Zahra fell, the cold stone stole her breath. Chaos closed in men hooves blood. She saw Bertine kneel beside her. In his eyes, regret and a final truth. She fell. Not like this, she told herself, rising. She grabbed a foreign sword, heavy, awkward. With my shamshir. The man with the plume smiled. He tried to disarm her. Zahra attacked, missed, resisted. Heat returned to her body for the first time in weeks. She danced a step, held the blade high. He was cautious, cunning. He caught her, twisted her wrist. The sword dropped. He dragged her to the edge, the river open like a mouth. She gasped for air. God forgive me. Then, above the roar, a voice called to her. An impossible voice. And the world suspended, waited. Chapter 38. The sword and the path. Isarn burst onto the bridge like a storm summoned by love. Mounted, shamshir drawn, he knew before seeing that Zahra was in danger. Something ancient and fierce ignited in his blood. If I lose her, I lose myself. He saw her suspended over the abyss, fragile as a prayer, held captive by a Spaniard with a grotesque hat. The pilgrims shouted broken words, ambush, death, but Isarn no longer heard anything but his own pulse. He advanced, cutting through the air, steel spun and fury made way. Anselm behind him fought with the calm of a fulfilled oath. My honor does not retreat. A bandit emerged like a raven. Isarn leapt to the ground and in a swift motion tore off his arm. The river claimed the dagger, and the body fell weightless. The man holding Zahra used her as a shield. She clung to that arm with the dignity of one who chooses to live. Not like this, not today. Isarn saw pain and love in his eyes, and understood that the future hung on a heartbeat. Stop! Shouted the other. Isarn didn't stop. He grabbed Zahra's hand, broke the enemy's wrist and plunged the blade in. The body fell, dragging Zahra with it. Isarn dropped the weapon and lunged forward, digging his legs into the stone. He held her. She hung over the roar of the water, feet brushing death. I won't let go, he shouted, and in his voice was promise and legacy. Zahra smiled, cold and brave. If this is the end, let it be with you. She wanted to tell him she loved him. The river took the words away. Isarn clenched his teeth, looked to the sky, and a nameless strength answered him. He lifted her. The cry of victory hurt like an ancient birth. Hands came, the stone cut but gave way. Isarn pressed her to his chest, alive, alive. In the shadows, Zahra thought she saw Bertine kneeling and a crowned giant, her brother. She barely smiled. Your Majesty, she whispered, and the world went dark.